Welcome everybody to an all-new episode of Hearthstone Hypotheticals. This is what we're going to be calling this new show where all we do is just ask questions on my Hearthstone Twitter every single day and see what the community thinks about these questions. I do anything from worst design card, which is what today's episode is going to be, down to why Priest needs to be changed. There's going to be a lot of content coming through these next couple of days because, like I said, I plan on posing a question every single day and then making a video about it. So if you guys want to see what questions are going to be turned into videos, you're going to have the best chance of finding that out over on the Twitter website. And also, you'll be able to communicate with me directly on some of these posts. So if you want to engage and maybe see your own comments in this video in the future, then definitely feel free to check out the Twitter. But let's go ahead and jump into the worst design cards in Hearthstone according to my Twitter. So the tweet reads, "What are the worst design cards in Hearthstone? Can be for any reason, but try not to be too negative," which is asking for a lot here, but I have a good feeling about the people that engage with my Twitter. The funny and the best replies are going to be featured in the video, but we're just going to go through everything because there actually weren't too many replies to this particular question. But the very first one on the list is Khartut Defender, most likely for its interactions not only in Priest, but there was actually a rogue deck, N'Zoth Rogue, where the whole point of the deck was to play as many Khartut Defenders as you could, and then play N'Zoth, which would bring back a full board of these Khartut Defenders, and then you would play Togwaggle's scheme, which shuffled a whole bunch of copies of N'Zoth in order to essentially give you a wall of healing taunts every single turn. Definitely a frustrating deck to say the least, but I feel like Khartut Defender actually did its job particularly well. I don't think it's a badly designed card. However, it does have ways of being very, very annoying. So I feel like Neil, unfortunately, is just reminded of the bad times of Khartut Defender. But most of the times this card saw play was like if Mage had like played it back in the days with Conjure's Calling. Conjure's Calling with this minion was actually particularly useful. But yeah, other than that, Priest was really the one that took advantage of this card, and most people just don't like Priest, as you guys will see in a future video. But Christian says the worst design card for him is definitely Shudderwock. My claws that bite, my jaws that catch. This is actually what most people say is the card that made Ben Brode decide to leave the design team because he was not a fan of this particular style of card. And I can definitely understand his criticism and a little bit of worry when it comes to cards like Shudderwock, because literally you are at mercy of every single battle cry that is ever printed in the game whenever this card can be played. So if you have a battle cry that's just literally, deal 10 damage to the face, then suddenly that limits design space because Shudderwock is going to be able to take advantage of that. I don't like calling cards bad design, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to have to say that Shudderwock is a fun card in execution, but a terrible card to go up against. So I think that's going to fit my criteria on what I decide are, quote, good or bad design cards. It's more so the feelings that people get after seeing them play, where it's like, as soon as you see this card, if you're frustrated, good lord, it's a little bit frustrating to deal with, and it might be badly designed in that case. But Shudderwock definitely goes up there. I would give this card like a 4 or a 5 compared to all the other stuff that has been printed in Hearthstone. But yeah, this card is powerful, but because it's powerful, it leads to a lot of negative gaming experiences. Hilarious card. I love it, but unfortunately, most people don't agree with that. Let's see here. So Cyber Zubat says that Draconic Lackey and Draconic Studies are some of the worst design cards because the 1-mana Discover and Alex or Ysera, even when they admit that Discover Dragons were too strong, they still kept printing them. This is one thing I actually don't mind Blizzard doing, is reprinting cards specifically for one class. So Draconic Lackey was something that could only be found in like the evil classes, so in Rogue, in Warlock, and in Priest. I think there was one more, yeah, in Warrior as well. But the only one that really took advantage of this was Rogue, because Rogue had the one with the most amount of Lackey generation, and random dragons can really skew the game one way or another, especially now that we have cards like Alexstrasza Lifebinder and Malygos the Spellweaver, especially like in Priest. Like, good lord, finding Malygos out of Draconic Studies is definitely freaking good, to say the least. I don't want to say this card is bad design, but I can understand where Zubat is coming from, because for Priest particularly, Priest has a lot of ways of just being able to summon Big Dragon, and then suddenly they bring it back with N'Zoth, and this Draconic Studies essentially fills the role of your dragon in your deck, because you can literally just choose one randomly. So I think that the Studies cards are definitely cool, but whenever it comes to like random dragons, I'm glad they put it in Priest, because Priest has to wait a little bit. But then there's cards like Mage Scribe that can come down as early as like turn 3 sometimes. Like, Draconic Studies is an in-between card. I would give it a 2 or like a 2.5, because there are times where like you just play the card and you don't really get that good of a dragon. But dragons as a tribe are usually pretty good and can be game-winning. So I can understand where Cyber Zubat is coming from. No Clapper is saying that Outcast cards fit the bill for what he believes is the worst designed cards in Hearthstone. Their mechanic is inherently polarizing and not always possible to skillfully play around. Besides, I'd love for every class to have access to secrets, which is more of a broad design flaw in my opinion. I'm kind of confused by this comment, not gonna lie, because he's talking about like Outcast cards being like really bad, and then suddenly secrets being a little bit more broad. I don't think I agree with that. In fact, I think secrets are a little bit more polarizing to play around versus Outcast cards. I'm not really sure where No Clapper is coming from, but just to give you my take, I think that Outcast cards are actually an incredible mechanic. I think that they're very well designed, because there's either one of two situations that can happen from a card, and I love versatility to where you're not just playing the card in the same way every single time. Skull is kind of an exception to this rule, to where its discounts that you get off of its Outcast effect are just so good to where you really don't want to play it for its regular effect. But all the other Outcast cards, like Eye Beam, can be played for regular mana, Spectral Sight, cards that you find at Ildari Studies, those cards can all see play even when they're not outcasted. Philosophy being another one that just randomly popped in my head. While secrets, look at what Omayog has done to the game recently. Like, it's literally counterspell for 1 mana, but that's not the important thing about secrets in my opinion. Whenever you haven't seen a second copy of a secret, sometimes you literally have to play around the same secret over and over and over and over again. So case in point, if your opponent is playing 1 secret at a time, instead of having 2 secrets or even 3 secrets on the field at the same time, you sometimes have to take these really weird guesses to where it's like, all right, I have to play around second counterspell, or I have to play around second Oh My Yogg, because I have this one spell that's really important for me to throw down. I can't let this paladin get rid of my apotheosis as priest. I need the healing. So, like, secrets, I think, limit the game insanely more than No Clapper is describing here, unless I'm misreading the sentence. But regardless, I think Outcast is a fine mechanic. Secrets personally drive me up a wall, so I don't enjoy them. But you need secrets in Hearthstone because you need something effectively along the lines of traps being triggered for some of these classes that struggle every now and again. Roman is saying that Genn and Baku are the worst design cards, and this is actually a pretty funny inclusion here, because these were the first cards to get rotated to Wild faster than their original rotation date, because they needed to be Hall of Fame, like they needed to be taken care of, because Baku and Genn just created so consistent of game strategies to where it literally didn't matter what you put in your deck half the time. You just needed to fill the requirement. There were already meta deck lists made with these in powerful legendaries, and they would just overshadow everything for so long. I think this is actually a great case of when design becomes too simple. Sometimes something along the lines of only odd cards is even more limiting than other cards, to where it's like if you have like dragons that are required for an effect or something like that. And the main reason why is because if these cards are so powerful, why is anyone going to play something else? Like Genn Greymane, I think, is a really powerful card, especially back when even Paladin was like particularly meta. I had one of my best ranks ever actually in Standard because of even Paladin with Genn Greymane, and that's because literally turn 1 you would always hero power, and then you'd play a card like Dark Conviction to turn it into a 3/3 immediately. And then on the flip side, Baku, literally you have a 1-drop almost every single turn, and then you immediately hero power into 2 1/1s. So like, Paladin definitely took advantage of these cards. But then you have cards like Demon Hunter. Now in Wild, you have cards like Even Hunter, Even Mage. I think that these cards, unfortunately, have to be labeled as badly designed cards due to the fact that they literally warped the entire Hearthstone meta and are still definitely seeing play in Wild Ladder, like with Wild Odd Demon Hunter and Odd Rogue and all those decks. But regardless, definitely have to give a 5 out of 5 to Genn and Baku in this particular situation, because they literally got Hall of Fame faster than any other card for the sake of balance. So I think that has to go into the badly designed card slot. Subaru is saying that cards that discover cards that give you a way to discover cards and a large pool of good options are badly designed. And I agree and disagree with this. I don't think that Discover itself is a problem, but I do agree with what Subaru is saying to where you discover a card that finds another card, which finds another card, which finds another card, and you get what I'm saying. Essentially, I'm not a fan of infinite loops in Hearthstone when it literally warps the gaming experience for both players. So, like, on one side, one player is having the time of their life because they're just finding resource after resource after resource, and then you have the other side where the player's like, good lord, I don't know what I'm playing around. I'm fighting a priest. I don't want to deal with this anymore. So I think that this is definitely a good topic to touch on for Blizzard specifically, because Discover cards, I don't think are going away. I don't think they should go away. However, you can't make them literally like renew, find renew used to be, because that infinite loop is just absolutely ridiculous. And every now and again, like, Priest just literally generates everything that they could possibly need. Like, I have never seen a Priest play against all odds in their deck, and the amount of times that I see Priest randomly find this card is just unheard of. So, Discover, it's not going to be... I don't want to say it's not going to be a problem in the future, but something to keep in mind is that more cards are going to be printed, so this next set is going to be very, very crucial for Priest to finally get some bad spells, so that way the Discover cards can finally, miss the shot every now and again. But Discover cards, Blizzard, if you're listening, just tone them down a little bit. Just tone them down a little bit, and I think they'll be perfect. This next one is actually not a surprise to me, because Ridiculous Hat is saying that Divine Favor definitely goes on the bill here. And I think somewhere along this post he also said Crackle, because he does not like those cards. But Divine Favor, you look at other cards that are 3 mana, like Arcane Intellect. Arcane Intellect is 3 mana, draw 2. Divine Favor can be 3 mana, draw 10 in the right situation. So this card can definitely be limiting in terms of what Aggro Paladin can do. And just good lord, dude, Aggro Paladin was just a complete monster with Divine Favor. Even decks like one of my favorite decks of all time, Anyfin Paladin. Anyfin Paladin was one of my favorite decks, and it definitely played Divine Favor because you were just trying to thin out your deck and quickly draw the really important cards, and half of the deck was like 1 to 2 mana anyway. So if you need to throw out some cards and then play Divine Favor by like turn 6, you definitely had that going for you. And then in the mirror, it's like this card becomes even more frustrating because if you don't play your Divine Favor first, then you're just sitting with a dead card a lot of the time. Unfortunately for Paladin, they have a lot of ways of being able to just cheat the game out quickly. At least I am aware of this because I'm a Paladin main. But Divine Favor was definitely the gas that gave Aggro Paladin a lot of strength. That's part of the reason why you don't see it in the core set anymore. So I feel like Ridiculous Hat is definitely hitting this on the head here, because this effect may not look as powerful until you actually play it and realize, oh god, I could draw 7 cards from this on average. So Divine Favor, pretty good card when you're going up against like an aggro deck, or when you're going up against a control deck, and you are the aggro deck that just needs to complete its mission as soon as possible. I would give this card like a 3 out of 5 in terms of like bad design, because unfortunately, this is one of those cards that falls into the theme where it doesn't look that powerful until you're actually playing it. And sometimes it could be hard to evaluate Hearthstone cards because of literally that. Like, you make a card, it doesn't seem to be that meta driving, and then suddenly an aggro deck like Paladin will just be able to just cruise through a lot of their games. So I feel like Divine Favor is like one of those cards that falls into a category where it's awesome when it works, but it's not healthy when it works. Mad at Arms is going with an old classic of 4 mana Barnes. Never been happier to dust a card repeatedly. Oh man, this is one of those cards to where, I think I said this in the last video, where like it's interesting to get these sort of like these cards like Barnes, where it's like you summon a 1/1 copy of a random minion. All right, so you're automatically thinking, what is the minion that would work perfectly with this? And kind of like what I was saying with Divine Favor, there's one option that works extremely well that completely warps games and makes it to where your opponent has like no way of being able to beat you, and that card was, of course, Yashiraj. Get a 1/1 copy of Yashiraj, it pulls the actual 10/10 from your deck, and you could easily have a board of like, I think, 14, 15 stats as early as, 15, 16 stats as early as turn 3. So that's kind of a problem, because unless you're playing Priest and you have like Death, or you're playing Warrior, you have Execute, or some sort of hard removal, you're not killing the 10/10, which is going to actively kill you in 2 turns. So Barnes is I again, dude, you're seeing like my you're seeing like the duality that I have right now with some of these cards, because I have good memories with some of these cards, but I also have really bad memories with some of these cards. One good memory in particular that some people may not remember is the Barnes Ancient One combo, where the whole point of the deck was to literally play Barnes twice with a Shadow Step and then bring out 2 Blood of the Ancient Ones in order to make a 30/30 minion, I think as soon as turn 5, if you were lucky and you had Coin and Shadow Step. But yeah, that deck is definitely a lot of fun and really gets into the spirit of what Barnes was all about. But then you have a card like Yashiraj, which just completely blows it out of the water, unfortunately, and Barnes just becomes the one card to tutor out the Yashiraj. So, amazing flavor. I think this actually had amazing design until Yashiraj came in and just completely obliterated what you would use this card for. Because now nobody uses Barnes in an interesting way. They just play it in Big Priest. They don't even really play it in Big Priest anymore because it's 5 mana, and you have a card like Greetings, Fellow Humans. I forget its name. Convincing Infiltrator. But yeah, Barnes, really cool card. It was very awesomely designed until Yashiraj came in and ruined it. And that's going to be my opinion. I don't think you guys are going to change my mind about that. Barnes, cool card when it wasn't just Yashiraj. Draz is saying that he's not a fan of Shudderwock, so again, not too surprising there. We already saw one person not be a fan of that. But Mickerboy DK is saying he does not like Kangor's Endless Army. It was a mass resurrection for 7 mana that only summoned the good minions, so you could also play smaller minions. I don't really think that Kangor's Endless Army was that bad of a card. In fact, I think it only had like 1 meta to where I did particularly well in. And I think that cards like Kangor's Endless Army were actually really cool specifically for mechs, because it literally incentivized you to not just play aggro and actually just play like something a little bit more controlled, to where you have one big mech that could maybe make a difference when you resummon it. But unfortunately, Kangor's Endless Army was just too expensive for 7 mana and too specific for Paladin. Paladin really didn't have the greatest amount of mechs to utilize outside of like the egg. The Dynomatic Egg was just definitely something that was pretty useful, getting like an 8/8 out of nowhere and then throwing Ziliax on there or something like that. But Kangor's Endless Army really didn't have a meta that it fit in. Like, I can't even say that it's like Mass Resurrection for 7 mana, because you have to literally build your deck around it. It's not something to where you just put a minion in there, bring it back, and then suddenly you have a 10/10 that's really good. You need mechs, otherwise this card is a dead card. I actually think Kangor's Endless Army is a well-designed card for that reason, but you could also argue that it's a bad design card, because how is it going to see any play, because mechs and Paladin just aren't really a thing. And even when this card was printed and mechs were being pushed, it still was not good enough. So I think that Kangor's Endless Army is actually a fine card. It just didn't get to see any time in the limelight. So there, that begs the question, if it did see time in the limelight, would it be oppressive and would it be badly designed? I don't believe so. I really don't believe so, because unless you did something with Ziliax, Kangor's Endless Army was not winning you any games, let's be honest. Competitive Player Orange, though, is saying Imp-losion is one of the most frustrating and bad designed cards ever, and he's actually got a pretty good take on it. He says that this card led to one player feeling miserable a large amount of the time when it was played. And pretty much, there's only 2 situations that happened with this card. You played Imp-losion as the player, and you only got 2 imps out of it, and you dealt 2 damage, and it was completely terrible. Or you're on the other side, and it deals 4 damage, and it completely takes you off guard. Your opponent has a board of a board full of 1/1 imps now, and it really just came down to whether or not you hit the 3 or the 4 a lot of the times. Like, sometimes you would safely play this card against like Knife Juggler or something, or you would have Knife Juggler on the field while playing this. That was particularly useful. But Implosion is how old Hearthstone philosophy used to be. I would say they're definitely trying to get away from this mechanic, because cards like Implosion are a great example of how polarizing sometimes these cards can be, or how frustrating they are. So I think I actually do have to give this a badly designed rating, only because there's literally always going to be somebody that is not happy about the outcome of this card one way or another, and that also includes the person playing it. So you're also seeing this kind of mechanic with cards like Crackle. Crackle is notoriously known for being hated by not only Ridiculous Hat, but by Reynad. Reynad was very vocal, extremely vocal actually, about his hatred towards Crackle, and this is the exact same vein, except Crackle literally kills you, so therefore it's a bit more frustrating. So I'm glad that Hearthstone's not really going for like 2 to 4 damage anymore, and you can kind of see that with cards like Lightning Storm. It no longer deals 2 to 3, it's always just 3 now, which is how I believe cards like this should behave. I don't really know if they need to bring back this like mixed damage unless they can somehow give it a reason for having mixed damage. Like Crackle was like, you know, you literally just either dealt a lot of damage or no damage. At least Imp-losion gives you something else in addition to the damage. But I would like to see... Actually, I know I shouldn't say that I would like to see. If they are going to print more cards like this, I should say that I would like to see something a little bit less random. But when you're literally dealing with 2 to 4, that's already random. You kind of can't fix that. So I feel like Imp-losion we should definitely avoid in the future if we have any other cards like that being designed. This next card on the list is coming from Hunt the Snark, and he's saying that no good was ever done with Master Oakheart. For those of you who are looking at this card and is like, how can this card ever be good? There was one particular Druid deck and one Priest deck, kind of, that really took advantage of Master Oakheart. And they both did the same thing. Big taunts. Massive taunts. Only the thickest taunt minions you would see in a Master Oakheart deck. So in Priest, you had cards like, oh god, I don't know what one attack minion was pulled, but you usually would have the 2 mana, the 2 attack, 4 HP minion with Taunt and Divine Shield be brought out, and the Witchwood Grizzly, which is a 5 mana, 3/12. So you had huge minions coming out of this, but then in Druid, you had the bear that I mentioned earlier, the Grizzly, but then you also had a Dragon Hatcher, which was a 9 mana 2/4, which would bring out a dragon at the end of your turn. And I don't really know what... I forget what the 1-attack minions are, unfortunately. I can't 100% remember. But there was also Hydronox that was possible to pull out from Master Oakheart as a 3-attack minion. That was the big one. You could play Oakheart into Naturalize your Hydronox in order to bring back every single taunt that has ever died in your game. And you were also playing cards like Cube, so you had multiple copies of taunts that were being killed off and being brought back. So Master Oakheart definitely is another example of a card where it's amazing to think of the puzzles that come with it, but then when it's solved and it's figured out, this card becomes really, really frustrating to go against because all you're doing is just dealing with wall after wall after wall, because Druid literally had cards like Witching Hour. There we go, that's the name. Had cards like Witching Hour in order to bring back the Hydronox over and over and over again. So as long as your Master Oakheart could pull out the Hydronox, it's all that mattered. So now that I'm remembering how exactly this deck was played, you probably wouldn't play bears, but you still had a lot of taunts that were in this deck. Like, Druid just had access to almost everything back in the day, and then Master Oakheart just giving Druid yet another viable archetype. It was definitely interesting for the competitive meta, but if you're a casual player, you probably didn't like this card. And then there's Master Oakheart's inclusion in Priest, which Ridiculous Hat is not a fan of. He has talked about many times how Taunt Priest is his hated deck, most hated deck of all time. And that's because, again, like I said, with the 2-attack minion with 14 HP, but then there's also Convincing Infiltrator. There's just a lot of things that Priest can use with low attack and devastating death rattles and taunts. So Master Oakheart, I can definitely understand being a badly designed card in terms of what people experience him with, because this card, there's really no other way to play him. You play the really big minions that do something when they either when they hit the field or when they die, and then you have this gigantic swing. And sometimes that can just not be healthy for Hearthstone. I think that Master Oakheart is great that it's no longer seeing play, especially like in decks like Wild. I think if Druid had this available to it still and it was still wrecking faces, I would be a little bit upset about this card. But Master Oakheart, another example. Great puzzle, but in execution, it's really frustrating to go up against it. Ava Rita is saying that she does not enjoy Reno Jackson. How to turn every game into a 50-50 of did I draw him by turn 6 through 8, and if yes, I win, and if no, I lose. And then it also inspired a whole slew of Highlander cards that inspired building decks that sacrifice consistent quality for spiking high roll draws. I think that she actually hit the nail on the head here in terms of why people were frustrated with not just Reno Jackson, but Highlander cards as a whole. I think that the Highlander archetype in Hearthstone is actually extremely cool, but kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, there's a lot of puzzles that Hearthstone gives us at first where it's like, hey, here's a card that literally you can't play any duplicates. Figure out a way to make a deck full of 30 unique cards that actually wins the game. That's a cool puzzle, right? But then you have literally, you look at Reno Jackson, and you're like, what deck is he going to fit in? He's going to fit in a control deck. He fully heals your hero. Just hate aggro, absolutely build a deck that hates aggro, play Reno, win the game. And, I mean, I feel like you need decks like that completely counter aggro, but Reno Jackson is just one of those cards where it's going to be frustrating to go up against it time and time again. Case in point with its interaction with Ice Block. You literally don't die, cap yourself at 1, and then you fully heal with Reno Jackson. If you're a new player, that kind of sucks. Like, that kind of sucks a little bit. The biggest thing that I feel like people associate with bad games in Hearthstone is whenever they're like 1 damage away from winning a game, and then their opponent just does something to fully heal their hero. And literally, Reno Jackson fully heals your hero no matter what point of the game that you're in. So, she really does do a good point of highlighting the fact that that Highlander cards really do need a lot of inconsistent deck building requirements in order to get these insane pop-off turns. And I feel like Hearthstone is actually starting to move away from that in terms of like the Reno Highlander build. I don't think we're going to be seeing any Highlander cards printed for at least another 2 expansions because of how many people that have been vocal about their dissatisfaction with Reno decks. In fact, Fino, I think, had one of the best takes about why Highlander decks are naturally frustrating to go up against and how they can be conceived as badly designed. And it's mostly due to the fact that your opponent has no way of being able to control what they play around. They literally just have to play their cards and hope that their opponent doesn't have that 1 out of 30 cards that literally counters them. So, like, I can't really think of like any great examples off the top of my head except for like Board Freeze with like Frost Nova and like Blizzard. But say that you're an aggro deck and the one card that you can't win against in this particular situation is if your opponent plays Frost Nova to set up for either a Reno or a board clear for the next turn. So you play out your entire hand being like, if they have the Frost Nova, I lose. If they don't have it, I win. In your head, you should be thinking there's only one card that beats me, so that's a 1 out of whatever. So I should totally go in and beat my opponent because there's a very high chance that I can just steal the win here. And then suddenly Frost Nova comes down and you as that player are like, well, they had the card, now it doesn't matter. My decisions literally didn't make any difference this game because they had the one card that made all the difference. And then they play Reno and it's the same thing over and over again. So Highlander decks, cool. Definitely like them. But there's a lot of ways to where players can be very easily worn out by these effects. And I feel like Reno Jackson was definitely a card that a lot of people hated during League of Explorers, and it just kind of became a staple. So therefore, people just accepted that it was part of the game. They didn't really like it. I think Reno, my personal opinion, pretty cool card, very well designed. But I like Highlander decks. If you don't like Highlander decks, you're not going to enjoy this kind of mechanic. I enjoy playing a deck with a puzzle in mind, to where I don't know if this is going to work. We're going to see how it does, do things for science, but fully healing your hero, not your Reno, is something that might just be a little bit too powerful. But in Hearthstone's history, it seems that Reno has kind of fit into a perfect meta. But regardless, maybe we should stick to not making Highlander cards for quite some time, because there's also cards like Zephyrs that still have given us a bad taste in our mouth. El Tinho is saying that the 2-mana deck of Lunacy was definitely the most frustrating card and badly designed card to go up against because of the 7-mana, 4-charging 3/5s. I think that this one was not necessarily overlooked, but deck of Lunacy is not really the problem here. It was the fact that all of the spells that Deck of Lunacy could find were so consistent because the Discover pool for all of the cards in Standard is literally the smallest that we'll ever see it. So I feel like this is just a case of bad, like a bad situation at the wrong time, where like literally Deck of Lunacy was just, it literally didn't see play in the previous expansion because it had so many cards that it could pull randomly. But then in this expansion with all the rotations and stuff, Deck of Lunacy just had literally only 2 10-drops, and one of them was game-winning, and then the other one would buff up your other minions if you somehow summoned like a Glowfly Swarm or something like that. And this also comes back to saying that Mana Cheat is also really good in Hearthstone. So I would always be careful whenever Blizzard is trying to print something like Deck of Lunacy, where suddenly one card becomes a version that's 3 mana less but the same cost. Like, that's literally just cheating mana and with extra steps. And it being 2 mana at the time was definitely a problem. It was definitely a problem. So unfortunately, like, Deck of Lunacy just needed to be tackled, and I wonder if it can actually go back to being 2 mana once we have more spells. But unfortunately for a card like this, there's just so many cards in Hearthstone to where when it works, it just completely feels unfair. And this is just one of those cards that was absolutely unfair. Like, I don't even want to get into how much mana was cheated by, like, turn 4, turn 5 in some games, because good lord, this deck just absolutely high-rolled you every single time. So luckily, Deck of Lunacy is going to hopefully stay at 4 mana. If it goes back to 2 mana, it better be when it rotates to Wild and it has a bigger card pool, because that's what's really important with cards like a Deck of Lunacy. How big is their card pool generation, and how consistently are they going to get the most powerful cards in that pool? Eltinho is also saying that he did not like Arcane Flakmage, and honestly, the only reason why this card is a problematic design card is because of 0 mana secrets. Again, mana cheat. Mana cheat is the biggest thing that makes this card problematic, because literally, you look at this card at the beginning, and it's a 2 mana 3/2. So you play it on turn 2 and play a secret on turn 3, right? Nope, that's not what happens. You play this on turn 2 when you have a 0 mana secret that you got from your turn 1 coin into Ancient Mysteries, and then you completely dunk on whatever aggro opponent that you're going up against. Arcane Flakmage, I feel like, was fine when it first came out, but then the moment that mages were able to get 0 mana secrets like it's nothing, and I'm not including Kirintor Mage as a part of this. Kirintor Mage, you literally have to develop the 3 mana into the minion, and then you get a secret out of it. I'm fine with that kind of interaction, but Flakmage, with cards like Ancient Mysteries, no. I do not like Secret Mage, and I would like Secret Mage to stop getting help. It doesn't need any help. If you're going to print a card for Secret Mage, make sure it doesn't break Wild. Please, I'm tired of this archetype. I don't want to see any more turn 1 Cabal lackeys into Secret. I'm done. I'm done. No more. And continuing the Secret Mage hate, Explosive Runes, the secret that you can't play around. The Explosive Runes is actually the secret that made me hate secrets. It's just the truth. Explosive Runes is literally a card you have to play around every single time. Remember what I told you about with the Paladin situation with Oh My Yogg, where like every single time they play one secret, you have to play around all of the secrets? That was literally Explosive Runes, because until both copies were played, you could not summon a minion safely. Like that is absolutely freaking, that's mind-boggling, dude. That is a paranoia effect in Hearthstone to where you can't get rid of it. You cannot not be paranoid against Secret Mage. You have to be so paranoid about every single little play from turn 1. Stop supporting Freeze Mage, please, for my own sanity. Jason is going with a pretty interesting approach here with the Warsong Commander nerf, and I think he's more so making a joke about how this what is this effect change? It used to be so good to where you summon a 2 or 3 a 3 attack minion and it gets charged, and now your charged minions have +1 attack. This is just a case in point, at least in how Blizzard used to be, where they printed a really good card and then they didn't want to see this card see play anymore, so they just made it absolutely terrible. And I think Warsong Commander has like 4 different changes that it had or something along those lines. But yeah, this is not how you should nerf cards. You should nerf cards to where they can maybe see play and they're just not top tier, but you can't just make a top tier card into Warsong Commander nowadays, where it just literally gives your charge minions +1 attack. And if I remember correctly, I think they reverted this nerf. But yeah, this is not how you should nerf cards, and luckily they've kind of leaned away from this design philosophy. The next card on this list is going to be Secret Passage. Rogue mains will love it, but everybody else will hate it. When this card drew you 5 for 1, everybody was like, what? There is no way this is a real card. When this first was released or like leaked or whatever, I looked at this card and I'm like, there is no way in hell that this is real. They cannot give Rogue this kind of card. And well, as it turns out, it is pretty real. The one thing I will say that's pretty interesting about Secret Passage is when you play cards like Polkelt into Secret Passage, it doesn't immediately draw the highest mana cards for you, because it literally replaces your hand. It doesn't draw from your deck. It literally just gives you 4 random cards from your deck. So little interesting interaction fact there for you if you guys did not know that. But in actual application, this card is literally just play 1, get 4 cards from your deck, play those 4 cards, and then that's it. So it's literally a 1 mana, thin 4 cards from your deck, and a lot of the times, like, you don't really care what gets pulled from this unless it's like a combo piece, like if you're playing Alex Rogue or something like that. But Secret Passage is one of those cards where it's like, we're just going to keep seeing this card over and over and over again. why 1 mana is just my biggest question. Because at the same time, though, if you make it 2 mana, it becomes even more difficult for Rogue to be able to use this. But it's just like, Rogue has so much card draw. They have so much card draw. Do they really need even more card draw along these lines? I can understand some people's skepticism behind it. Secret Passage is kind of in check nowadays. I don't think it's like breaking the wild scene at all, but in Standard, it's definitely seeing a ton of play. I don't really think that Secret Passage is badly designed in terms of how the card actually performs, but like every single time you see this card as like when you're going up against it, you're just thinking, oh god, they're gonna draw their entire deck by like turn 6, and that's not even unheard of anymore. Rogue can literally deck itself out by turn 6 in Standard. In Standard, they can do this, and Secret Passage just really is one of the cards that consistently helps them get those missing puzzle pieces. So like, I don't know, man. I like this card whenever I play it as Rogue, but every other time I go up against it, I'm not a fan of it. So I think I'm gonna have to give this a badly designed stamp just for the time being, just because 1 mana draw 4 in Rogue? Nani? The next card on this list is coming from Cryptic Command, and he's saying that he did not like Dr. Boom Mad Genius. He thinks that this is probably gonna be along the lines of it's a badly designed card due to the random hero powers and how tilting it could be for your opponent to have to deal with the mechs having rush as well. Because one thing that was particularly powerful about Boom was not just the fact that he would give you a whole bunch of armor every now and again with the hero power, but all of your mechs literally were becoming a threat as soon as they hit the field. And sometimes Boom could find yourself a random mech. So, like, God, what were the mechs that were really good at the time? There was Omega Devastator. That was a big one. Dino-Matic. Oh, God. Those are, like, I think the big two right there. Because you also had cards like Omega Assembly, which would find you even more cards. So, like, Control Warrior, I love playing Control Warrior. One of my favorite archetypes when I first played was actually Wallet Warrior, and that began my love for the Control Warrior archetype. But there were a lot of situations where Dr. Boom Mad Genius would just literally just kick W out of a win because he got the right hero power. Like, I don't want to say he's badly designed. I liked Boom a lot. I think he's a really cool card, and the flavor of this card is absolutely amazing. But they did have to nerf this card to 9 mana temporarily due to how powerful it was at the time. So I don't necessarily want to say that Boom was badly designed. But again, it fits into the same exact category as a lot of these cards. When it works, it really works. But I think the mechs having rush is probably like the one thing that really put this card above and beyond. Because the thing that's kind of interesting with this card is that if it was just random hero powers, I don't think it would be that good. Like, the random hero powers and the rush really do work perfectly together, because you have ways of being able to stall and then being able to remove consistently every single turn if you built a deck that was good with mechs. And let's be honest, you had a decent amount of mechs in your deck. You also had cards like Zilliax. Let's not forget about that. So Dr. Boom Mad Genius, it kind of limited design space a little bit, because if you're playing Control Warrior, you're putting this in your deck every single time. So hero cards became a little bit problematic in this meta. Hagatha, unfortunately, wasn't even on the same tier list as Dr. Boom was, in my opinion. So I don't want to say that he was badly designed, but I can understand the frustrations that a lot of players could have with this particular card. Steve is saying that he does not like the design of Whizbang the Wonderful and Tinkmaster Overspark. One of these maybe seems like you have covered Nozdormu. Can't really imagine putting one of these in your deck for any reason. Maybe if your deck is just already 1/1s. I feel like he's missing the point of Whizbang. Whizbang was actually a card that was literally supposed to be for free-to-play players. Or if you wanted to just essentially have a random deck option, which I think is something that we could probably make in Hearthstone without any kind of like problem. But Whizbang was just like one of those cards where for casual players, you opened it and you had one card that gave you 18 decks or something along those lines. So I don't think Whizbang is a badly designed card by any means. I think he's actually a fantastically designed card because it gives casual players more ways of being able to enjoy the game. And then Tinkmaster Overspark, I'm extremely confused about because I love this card. It just doesn't see play because, unfortunately, you have to play it into, like, one particular minion, and then you're still hitting a 50-50. So, like, you pretty much need to throw this against, like, a Death Rattle. Like, throwing it against a Sylvanas or something is kind of funny, even if you turn it into a 5/5. But this card was actually seeing a lot of play in Hearthstone's beginning. I don't know if it was in beta or if it was just the first meta after before Noxramas came out. But Tinkmaster, I think, is a perfect example of a Hearthstone balanced card. You have a random effect that also has another random effect that can either benefit you or punish you in one way or another. And I feel like this is the kind of randomness that we need in Hearthstone, to where it's not game-breaking whenever you fail the roll, like with Crackle, for example. Like, this card is, okay, I summoned a 5/5 for my opponent on an accident on turn 3. Probably going to take a little bit of damage, but I'm not going to lose the game because of it. So I would love to see cards like Tinkmaster that could either benefit me or punish me, but not completely ruin the game because of it. Hey guys, remember Crackle? Remember Crackle? It's on this list. It's a badly designed card because Reynad hated it, so I think that's all we really need to say about this card. Nah, but to be honest with this card, it's too much, dude. You're telling me for 2 mana you could pop off a fireball 25% of the time, and if I have a spell damage minion, then it becomes 50% of the time? I don't know, dude. I don't like Crackle. I don't think I can justify this card in any way, shape, or form, because there's either 2 situations that happen. You're the player that's playing it and you miss lethal, or you're the player that's going up against it and they kill you. Someone's going to be mad at the end of the day. We don't need cards like this in Hearthstone anymore, where someone is going to be physically upset after one of these exchanges is made. The next card on the list is definitely a card I think everybody can agree with. Mindrender. Can we just please just get rid of the card? Like, literally, Darroch Brown himself is saying, let's punch this card in the face and never see it again. And you want to know my reaction every single time I see this card? Share your thoughts. Okay, nope, I'm out. I'm just gonna leave this game of Hearthstone now because there's no reason for me to play it. Mindrender Illucia is just like, it was literally made as an anti-combo piece as an anti-combo tool for Priest, and then they literally just turned it into an anti-everything card for every single class. Like, literally what ended up happening with this card is that instead of using it in a way to stop a combo opponent from killing you and preventing them to have the win, you just literally play this card, steal your opponent's cards, and they have, like, a bunch of cheap stuff, and then they have nothing. You can effectively skip your opponent's turn with this card if you play this card right. I'm not a fan of it. I think it's toxic. I think it's badly designed. I don't want to see it anymore. Mindrender Illucia, out. Out of my game, please. I've already given a lot of hate over to Mindrender Illucia, so I don't think you guys need me to put in even more fuel onto that fire. But something I will definitely give you guys some more context about is actually the Rogue quest, because I think that, oh man, Quest Rogue is not a deck that I remember fondly. I actually have one particular story with Quest Rogue, and that was it is the only Hearthstone deck that has made me physically break my phone. I don't 100% remember how the game unwinded, but I remember throwing my phone at a wall because I was playing Quest Rogue a whole bunch and losing to it and losing with it. So it was just one of those decks where it's like, what am I doing wrong? I don't know what I'm doing. Just, yeah, that kind of thing. So I ended up throwing my phone against a wall when I was like really upset. And I mean, I'm not saying that I was justified or anything like that. I think I was definitely, fucking tilted, to say the least. But this card, literally, a lot of people can relate to that kind of story, where literally they just hated going up against this. They died by like turn 5. Sometimes you could literally complete this as early as turn 4 and summon the freaking reward by turn 4 because you had prep discount by 3 back in the day. So Quest Rogue is definitely like, I don't want to say it was like an oversight or something, but it was definitely a problem. So Caverns Below, I think, has to be at least a 4, just because it's a really good card. It was too consistent, and they literally nerfed this card like 4 times before it eventually was considered fine at its original playing level, like years down the road. So the Caverns Below definitely has to be a 4 in my opinion. And I know that I'm not rating a lot of these, but I feel like my reaction should tell you what I feel about these cards. But Caverns Below is just one of those cards to where I never want to see another archetype like this available for Rogue specifically, because Rogue literally plays little minions. Making little minions into 5/5s, no thank you. Abdullah is saying that he does not like Duskfallen Aviana and that it's a badly designed card. Quote him, very bad. I feel like this is another old design philosophy where like they kind of have to print bad legendaries in order to make the random legendary pool less consistent. You can't make every single class have every single one of their legendaries playable. However, Duskfallen Aviana just seems like they purposely made this card bad, because I think when this card was printed, Druid was really good. Druid really needed some bad cards in order to make it even with the rest of the classes, and this was just the way that I felt like they did it, is that they literally gave you a 5-mana card to where you could cheat mana if your opponent is literally dumb and doesn't kill the 3/7. But yeah, just this kind of card just will never see play, and you can literally just tell from the get-go. Like, there's no way this card's going to see play, because my opponent gets to literally play a card for free and then do something else. So literally they could just kill this card for free and then do another turn, and I lost my entire turn. So Duskfallen Aviana, just, I don't know, man. This feels like a bad card that they just made into a bad card, so that way Druid can have less cards in their playable pool. But then suddenly they're just always going to go towards the really broken stuff, and Duskfallen Aviana just doesn't really seem like a benefit to the class in any way, shape, or form. Aside from, the random being a bad outcome every now and again, which does need to happen. But other than that, I don't see a reason why Duskfallen Aviana is in the game, so I'm going to have to put it as a badly designed card. This last card showed by Dmitry Kazov is actually one that I 100% agree with on it being the worst designed card in Hearthstone's history. Psychic Scream. The best and most tilting board clear of all time, according to Dmitry, and I 100% agree with this. Like, this is, I think that they should have made this card a legendary spell and introduce legendary spells when they first printed this card, because what? What do you mean you're not killing the minions and you're shuffling them all into my deck for 7 mana and you can do this twice a game? Are you kidding me? This is one of those cards where it has to be a legendary spell. The fact that it's 7 mana, like, what? This is a 9 mana AoE. This is a 9 mana AoE for 7 mana, and it's the cleanest way of being able to get rid of death rattles. You don't have to deal with their effects. You just get them off the field. And half the time when you're playing Priest, you don't care about adding stuff into your opponent's deck. Like, that has to be the bad part about this card, right? That, you have to worry about fatigue and stuff like that. But when your opponent, like, when you're playing, like, Odd Paladin or something, and you just shuffle a bunch of 1/1s into your opponent's deck, then suddenly their draw is going to be so horrendous that it literally does not matter, because the Priest is going to be playing a bunch of big stuff, let's be honest. Like, Control Priest, Big Priest, every single good Priest deck played Psychic Scream. And it's kind of funny now, because back when Razakus Priest was a thing, this card was definitely running there, but Reno Priest doesn't even need Psychic Scream anymore, which really shows you how fast the meta is in Wild particularly. But Psychic Scream is just one of those cards where it's like, I never want to see this card ever again. I do not want to see a card that completely invalidates Death Rattles unless it is specifically made as an anti-Death Rattle tool, like that one card that denies Death Rattle triggers. But Psychic Scream definitely has to take the cake on the most stressful, most tilting, most worst design card in Hearthstone's history, because good lord, dude, this is just too powerful. You need to make this a legendary spell. That's just the only thing I can think of. I actually brought this up to Dmitry, and he replied with, I think they introduced legendary spells a few expansions after, but yes, Psychic Scream should definitely be one. So maybe we'll see this change made in the future, but I don't think it's going to happen. Psychic Scream is not breaking the meta by any means necessary, but still very frustrating, and I hated seeing this card when it was meta. And that concludes this list on some of the worst designed Hearthstone cards in the history of the game. Don't forget, guys, this is completely subjective, so if you have any kind of card that we missed over, feel free to put it down in the comments below, because all I'm doing is just reading from my Twitter posts. If somebody doesn't put it on there and I don't think about it while I'm making the video, it is not going to make it into the video. So if you ever want to make sure that your best take is going to be maybe featured in a video, feel free to check out the Twitter. And as always, if you guys enjoy this content, feel free to like the video, feel free to subscribe. Would love to have you part of the community, and I would love to be able to chat with you guys in the comments. Hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you for the next one.